Hey everyone, welcome to ShinKyu University. I am really excited to be interviewing one of my students, James, today. James is a teacher in England and also runs his own acupuncture clinic, which he has transitioned successfully into traditional Japanese medicine. James is an amazing student, but also an amazing researcher in himself. He's done a lot of research on the sinew channels and the classics. And he's just a brilliant mind, so it's really exciting to be talking to him about his experiences today. Without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and just let James kind of introduce himself as well and his clinic and what he does over there in England. Go ahead, James.
Hello. Yes, I have my clinic. It's in Kent, in a little town on the southeast coast of England called Herne Bay. It's just me in the clinic, and I've been in Herne Bay practicing for about just over 7 years. And in that time, I've built up a practice. And while I'm there, I'm obsessed with anything related to Chinese medicine or Japanese medicine. So I spend a lot of time reading as well as practicing. And within that time, I've been asked by City College of Acupuncture, which is in London, which is where I trained, um, and they basically eventually asked me to teach some lessons, which I am doing now. I've been doing that for about 3, maybe 4 years. I was an assistant to start with before bringing me into that. Um, my practice is quite varied. It's becoming more varied over time, but I mostly treat musculoskeletal patients. But that's changing a lot, and it has changed a lot over the last 2 years, but particularly more over the last few months, which is great. Um, I don't want to be a one trick pony. I want to be
Mm.
vast in what I do. Yeah, that's
So, so tell me why, because I know we really chatted over, I think it was Instagram for so long before you came into ShinKyu, and I followed so much of what you did. I love your gardening, and for those of you who don't know, James has a really interesting like Instagram with lots of gardening tips. You should check it out. But um, like you had done so much research, especially I think the Ling Shu in particular, right?
yes. That really just started. Well, I started reading it for my dissertation, which was a research paper. And I bought it and started reading it, and actually didn't understand any of it, to be honest.
Yeah.
Um, and that was between 2016 and 2017 is when I completed the 3 year course. Um, and then I kind of put it down for a bit, and then I think it was around about 2019 I started reading it again, and then got really into it, and then lockdown happened,
Mm.
and then I was reading it a lot more. Um, I, I have to have something going really to for me to for my mind to tick. And I started noticing things in there which sort of caught my interest. Um, I I'd finished my in 2019. I'd finished, or 2018. I finished my training in Tween R massage, um, and that spiked my interest in applied channel theory. So that got me really interested into palpation. Um, and there was some one of the students who was actually he'd been for one of the students for applied channel theory. He was actually been a practitioner for longer than I've been born. He came out of Worsley from somewhat time in the 70s, and then transitioned to Japanese acupuncture. And he was sitting really close to me, and every time the teacher, there was two sets of lessons. One with Jamie Hamilton, who also came from the Japanese tradition as well, and then eventually Jason Robertson. But both lessons, we both sat pretty much in the same place over the course of the days we were there. And each time something came up, he would say, "Oh yes," and he would reference very, very quietly something related to Japanese acupuncture. And I kept on thinking, I was already interested in the Japanese side of things because that's kind of where I came from when I wanted to become an acupuncturist in the first place. So that spiked my interest. But at the same time, I had a very enthusiastic colleague who was introducing me to classical acupuncture. So I during lockdown, I joined a group which I won't go into detail of why, but it wasn't really for me. So when I found out about ShinKyu, I what really wanted to be sure before I joined that it was the
Yeah.
right thing for me. So I spent ages kind of going back to it and watching all your material and still thinking this is what this is really close to how I feel about things generally.
Hmm.
Um, and I have no issue with TCM either. It was just this is just how I want to practice. I'm passionate
Yeah.
about TCM as well, um, and the medicine as a whole. I find that everything kind of integrates in some way. I even found that when I was in Japan, where the way the things were discussed as a general basis, if I count all the teachers together, my whole experience, they still had the eight principles in there.
Yeah.
It
100%.
it was still,
100%.
which is like I'm an eight principles TCM practitioner. That's where that's
Yeah.
what I was taught. So we have, is it internal, external? Is it excess, deficiency, yin,
Yeah.
yang? All of those things. That was all integral there, and I felt that was really helpful for me
Yeah.
to kind of think like that. When I was teaching the last lesson I had just before Christmas, I actually mentioned that to my students. I said, even what I'm doing now is still eight principles. So when we talk through these things, it's still coming from exactly the same place. It may be
Hmm.
applying it differently, but all these
Yeah.
things are pretty much coming from the same thing. And
Yeah.
I really, really appreciated that when it
Yeah.
came to the way you were explaining things online with your YouTube
Yeah.
videos. So coming from that point of view, I found that really helpful.
Yeah. Well, and I love that you brought that up because I think a lot of people, when they think of traditional Japanese acupuncture, they think that, oh, it must be a completely different system of thought. But in all actuality, TCM, the foundational theory of TCM is actually very solid. I
Mm,
think it is a very good system. Unfortunately, it's just kind of been removed from the patient on the table.
mm,
And I
yeah.
I don't know about you, but I always feel like for most of the students coming into Shinkyu, that's really that gap that exists for them, that their theory is so strong and the eight principles are not only paramount, but they're really universal. But when they get to the
Mm,
patient on the table, that's where TCM doesn't seem to be as like adaptable, perhaps is the right word for it. It's just so rigid in its system and its protocols that it's just not adaptable with palpation and referencing and things. How do you feel about that, considering your studies and how much you went down that classical path?
I feel that sometimes there can be assumptions when you don't have that person in front of you.
Yeah,
Um, I find this sort of these online questions, or even on a WhatsApp group, because I have my phone buzzing with people asking questions, and I'm thinking I don't actually know unless that person is in front of me. Um,
yes,
to actually have my hands on to find out what's going on. I've had in the student clinic, I've had students say the person's really cold. Can I use the heat lamp? And I would say, well, is it because they are sweating? This is during the day. Why are they sweating? Is it yin
yeah,
deficiency or yang deficiency? Where's it coming from? If you suddenly want to use a heat lamp without actually checking to see whether the body is
mhm,
cold, you need to see,
yes,
why is what's the issue. So you need to really
yeah,
really work it out, and you don't know that unless you actually make contact with that person. that's the thing I
Oh
found
yeah.
with coming from my massage background. I actually started off with holistic therapies years ago with massage, aromatherapy, reflexology. So I've always been hands on.
Yeah.
Um, and when I started looking into palpation, well, basically one of my teachers, Alex Brankowitz, he's well known in the UK for MSK. He does pretty much everything. He's hands on. He's an osteopath. He's been working for years. He's within lots of different areas of the medicine, and
Yeah.
also he trained with Dr. Wang Jiu, the author, the co-author of Applied Channel Theory. So he brought me into that way of thinking with palpation, him and a few other people,
Mm.
um, and I found that to really get more clarity, I needed to actually put, place my hands on that person.
Mm.
That is the thing that really the real key there with all forms of Japanese acupuncture. There's a hands-on approach with
Hmm.
every single type. Um, with TCM, it's all in the head, most
Yeah.
pretty much, um,
Yeah.
and that's all right. I mean, it's good to have. I'm trying to remember whether it's the right or left brain. I get that
Yeah.
confused. But you do need an aspect of that. You need to analyze to an extent, and I think it's really helpful. But sometimes you can get it completely wrong. I've
Hmm.
had instances, and this is one of my teachers who practices Malika, and he's also a Kampo teacher. He's one of my other influences. I shadowed him, and he was always talking about yang actually floating up due to yang
Hmm.
deficiency in the lower jiao. And very often you might be nourishing yin when actually you need to be tonifying yang. And you don't
Mm.
know unless you place your hands directly on somewhere on the abdomen and you realize actually this is not a yin deficiency problem. What I'm going to be doing might only temporarily work, or I suppose if you're a herbalist, it'll be even worse. You'll be doing completely the opposite to what the body needs.
Hmm.
Um, and the other thing is I've found some people have got what appears to be damp. It comes across like it's damp heat if I'm taking it just from what they are saying, but
Yeah.
by palpating the abdomen, particularly just around the rib area, it's freezing cold, and actually the heat is generated by cold that's
Hmm.
stagnated, um, and you, and then again you'll be treated in a certain way, and it won't be as
Yeah.
effective. And I've come across that so frequently where someone might think, oh, it's damp heat, but actually it's damp cold. That's probably the issue. So I find you don't get
Yeah.
that without palpating.
I,
Though,
I think you bring up a really interesting point that, and it's a really interesting way of saying it, that like from so many different perspectives with TCM, and yes, I agree with you, like it's really important to have that theoretical background and being able to critically think about your patient because
mm,
there's going to be days when you're tired and your
mm,
hands don't work and you got to be able to think, right? And especially if you're an herbalist, it's very important, I think too. But there's so many different situations where when you can just put your hands on the patient and completely change your mind, completely change what
mm,
you're thinking. When, you know, you were saying that, and I was remembering this experience when I was still a student. And I took a part-time job outside of Acura, which was like my main gig at a Sekotsuin, which is like a bone setter's place. And they did
mm,
Thai massage, acupuncture moxa, and a little bit of bone setting. Mostly it was more massage, but I remember they had this patient come in with scoliosis, really bad scoliosis, probably more than a 30-degree curve, 40-degree curve in his spine. It was really bad. And they gave me a tiger warmer because I was still a student to tonify and relax his muscle tissue. But at the time, I had no idea what I was doing. Like, I didn't know why. they wanted me to tonify the tissue. I didn't know what, like you were saying, like, is this cold damp? Is this, where is the cold? Is this yang deficiency? Is that, like, I didn't know any of that. And so all I knew that my mission was to relax the muscle tissues on either side of the spine. And I ended up severely overtreating this gentleman, like severely. And I got really
Mm.
reprimanded by the gal who's training me. And it was the first time I think in my career that I was like, oh, like there is a lot more to this than just simply applying a technique to make it work. Like you have to
Mm.
technically and theoretically know all of these things and then be able to palpate it and
Mm.
really confirm it. And I think how you summarized it in so many different situations, it's just so, so true. And something that I wish honestly was taught more in the schools. Do you like, does your school teach that? Like, do you try to teach this to your students as well?
Palpation. There's one lesson. In fact, I'm now the person that teaches it, and it's just
Okay.
we're revising the lesson a little bit, and we're going to be using a bit of not tai chi, a bit of qigong alongside. Well, I believe that you need to be doing that for it
Yeah.
alongside palpating, but we don't go into that kind of detail. And unfortunately, um, this is normally in their first year. By the time they get to their third year, they have forgotten most of what they've learned.
Yeah.
So the big thing
100%.
the big thing is trying to get it into the second year. But that's something that is out of my hands, and it's all about. It's about budget. That's
Yeah.
the thing. Trying to fit it in with everything else. And having an extra lesson. Um,
Yeah.
the thing that um, the thing that I try and do myself because in the in their third year, they still have other lessons, but it's mostly clinical. They have a whole
Mm.
year when they're in the clinic each week, and they have it split up into 4 blocks. Each block they have a different level that they're trying to get to. By the fourth block, they want to be at a level where when they finish, they're ready
Yeah.
to see the outside world. But each block they'll have a different teacher, um, and they'll have a different perspective because they're all coming from different
Right, right,
areas
right.
and different thought processes. So with me, they'll get more of that, but with other
Yeah.
people, they may not do because everyone teaches from their strengths. So my
Yeah.
strength comes from that, um, which I'm still learning myself through practice. But that's how I work, and I had to tell the students on their first day of because I was teaching block 2 at the moment
Yeah.
that I want them to be palpating before they come and see me. But not all of them remembered what I taught them from the first year. Some of them went on to then learn Twinar and who are
Mm.
very good at palpating. In fact, if they're watching this, you're doing really fantastically. With the others, I went through just some basic stuff I've been doing for a while, but which was basically working on the surface, just palpating on the surface very gently, which I've been doing for a while because that's what my aromatherapy teacher taught me. Who
Right.
she was coming from again from a Japanese perspective. She introduced aspects of shiatsu into what I was learning for the massage that we use with aromatherapy. So I knew a little bit already, but I've been doing it for a while. Um, so anyway, I digress. But I was showing her this student a very basic method of feeling the whole area to get a good
Yeah.
sense, and then knowing where to then palpate a little bit firmer. Um, which, by the way, is one thing I saw on one of your videos as well.
Yeah.
So I kind of took that more on board after seeing that. That was another reason
Yeah.
why I joined ShinKyu. Um,
Yeah.
and she got it immediately. I mean,
It's
she had a
it's
second
it's
pa- she had a
yeah.
second patient um, on that day, and she did it again. And when I checked, she was in all the right areas. It's like great.
What
So with me, they got it, but with some of the others, they don't. And it's not a criticism, but it's just that everyone works from their own
yeah.
strengths. Um,
Yeah.
and
I think it
yeah,
says something though, I mean, of course to your teaching, but also to the incredible power that palpation gives to your practice. That like
mm,
not only is it's something that I think everybody can get something from, but
mm,
it's also not that difficult to learn, really.
mm,
Like it's not rocket science. And I think
mm,
that's, one of the first things that we as humans do innately. Like if you, when you were a kid and you scraped your knee, what's the first thing that you did? You put your hand over it and held it, right? You
mm.
touch. And I think palpation is really, I mean, it's something that's, in my opinion, I'm very glad that you're adding it into your part of the education, but it's missing, I think, from a lot of TCM educations. And I'm just curious, considering that you went through school in the UK, and despite that, you had so many teachers of Japanese influence, I find super interesting. But also on top of that, like you came to this amazing place of palpation, like how, where would your practice be if you hadn't had that palpation as an influence? I'm not even sure if you can answer that because you started with massage too, right?
Yeah, it's always been there. I think that it would have just been I would just be asking loads and loads and loads of questions, which is how I was taught
Yeah.
anyway. Um,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and I in my head, I mean, this is just how I work. Um, I have if someone says that they have an issue, I immediately have in my head all of the alternative diagnostics, and then I ask
Mm.
questions, and it's like a flow chart, and I narrow it
Oh,
down.
wow.
I just
Yeah.
and then I'm like, right, if it's this, if I ask these questions, it'll give me an idea of where I need to go with the next set of questions, and then it
Yeah.
goes down and down and down. So I'll probably
Yeah.
get to the same thing, but but I won't necessarily be working in the same way. I don't think.
Hmm.
I um I've been picking points based on what I feel as well, um, before transitioning to Japanese acupuncture. I wouldn't do that without palpation.
No,
Um,
gosh, no.
it just would not be there.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, it's difficult to answer, but I know that
Yeah.
I've got a system already. I've
Yeah.
actually introduced the idea to the students already, and they will get me in block 4, and I'll bring it back to them again just to help
Yeah.
them, because that's how they will get slick with their questioning, and they
Well,
need to have that. So
and I think you bring up a really important point that, you know, the training of TCM is the training of TCM. And I don't think that there's, you don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. And I think if you can give people a way to refine the theory and the logic that they're already being trained to have in their brain and bring
mm,
it back into their hands and say, yeah, like the logic is telling you to go here now, palpate and find that right point. And being
mm,
able to like specify with their hands is just, I mean, I don't know about you, but it's definitely makes a difference in my treatment. I am really curious though, like, I know you had a lot of Japanese influence in your practice, but when you finally made that jump, which for you, I think really happened after you came to Japan with me on the In Touch Japan seminar and the
yeah.
Yashimichi workshop, right? Like when you made that jump from really TCM and kind of playing in Japanese acupuncture to really practicing Japanese acupuncture, what
Mm.
difference has it made for your practice?
It's made a dramatic difference. Cool. Where do I start? I so for a start, using one needle for
Mm,
everything is completely different. Um, I ordered some in from Japan. They are J-type sarin. I was already using sarin, um, so that was already helpful. Um, so moving round with just and no needle retention,
yeah,
that was something. The other thing is having the lesson from Jikan Ora Sensei in the In Touch was one of the foundational things that really gave me the confidence to be able to actually apply what I
hmm,
learned in the uh, in the Ayashi no Mishi. Um,
yeah,
I
He's a
because
phenomenal teacher, isn't he? He's just
he was
phenomenal.
so inspirational, and it was funny
Yep.
when I asked what was your favorite lesson, and because I'm not very good at remembering faces, he was sitting right next to me, and I was just telling him how brilliant he was, and I mean it sincerely. I thought he was so inspirational, and he was very clear. Also, it came from your translation. It was very clear about what he was doing, and the
Yes.
description of what he was doing made sense to me, and the
Yeah.
language made sense to me. When you've got an area that's empty, you want to feel it. You want it to fill up like a balloon. For me, visually, that worked really, really well.
Hmm.
Um, I don't know whether it's because those are the words he used in Japanese and you translated it, or whether that's what you did to help.
Oh no, those
Whatever
are
it
his
was,
words.
those were
As
his
much as
words.
I can. Yeah,
Yeah,
as
no,
much
no,
as I can, I direct translate.
yeah, it was just visually, it really helped me really
Yeah.
know what I was doing because I was imagining it just blow up. I won't
Yeah.
go to really understand this. Anyone who's watching this, I would suggest joining ShinKyu and going to Japan to learn this with him,
Yeah.
because for me, I don't know whether because I had watched the video previously and I didn't understand it at all.
Yeah.
Watching him do it and then doing it myself, I really, really like. I felt that it gave me confidence. So then
Yeah.
when I came into the clinic back, and it was the Tuesday after. It was very very quick after. Um, I I felt because we went through the kata, so which is the sequence, and I think kata as in karate. I did karate when I was at
Yeah.
university, so
Yeah.
I was thinking let's go through that in the order because
Yep.
it's there for a reason. It gave me the confidence that I knew what I needed to do for the treatments.
100%.
So that in itself helped.
Hmm.
So when I went in on my first day, I don't think that I was too great with my first few clients because I didn't. That was the first few. I didn't get that. The feedback wasn't that great when I saw them. But for the rest of the people, for the rest of the week, I got great feedback, and
Yeah.
some of them gave me instant feedback as well while I was doing the treatment, which I found really interesting. Like one person came in having trouble with their in breath, and then
Mm.
when I checked the when I did the pulse diagnosis, and then I looked at the tongue and I looked at the abdomen. Everything was telling me that this is a Shao Yin problem. So when I just thought, well, right, I need to make sure that I palpate the kidney channel. So I palpated the kidney channel, and somewhere around the ankle, I don't know exactly which point it was. I think it was around kidney 3 or 4. I'm not sure which one, but that for me now doesn't matter so much as long as I'm writing it down roughly where it is. I make sure I
Right.
always write down where. She immediately felt her in breath. She suddenly was able to breathe in better,
Oh, how cool.
and I was like, "Oh, this is great," because no one's ever said that
Amazing.
to me during a treatment ever. It's always you find out afterwards when they come back the
Yeah.
next week, and by then they would have forgotten a lot of the stuff that's happened to them because they just live
Yes.
in their life. So I was like, "Oh, this is
Exactly.
fantastic."
Exactly. Yeah.
So yeah, so that was a big difference having people in real time give me feedback while I'm doing
Yeah.
the actual treatment, because by then I would have left them and the needles would be in, and I'd either be doing moxa, which is what
Yeah.
I normally I'll needle them then moxa them when the needles are in, because that way I have enough time to do the moxa because I do mostly cones. Although, as you know, I'm trying to practice
Hmm.
uh,
We're working on it.
the rice grain. I'm working on that. But yeah, so I uh, I wouldn't get any of that. Um, and that was for a chronic condition. I have been treating chronic conditions, but since coming back from Japan, I've been treating a lot more chronic conditions, and it's given me the confidence to do that because
Yeah.
I know the theory, I know what I should be doing, but it's not always as effective. Not what I'm doing, and I would have
Right.
still treated. I would have with that patient. I still would have chosen Xiao Yin because of the information she was giving me.
Right.
So I may have still done something similar, but I may not have had that same result because um, finding the life point is another thing which has really helped. I understood the concept of life points, but having someone show me this is the life point with sorry, I'm always going to say his name wrong. Yus Yasuda Sensei. Did
Yasuda
I say his name
Sensei?
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yasuda.
When he came round and showed us where he was saying the live points are,
Yeah.
having confirmation that what I found was a live point really gave me confidence. So when I went back, I knew that I had a concept and an idea of what I was
Hmm.
meant to be looking for. I thought I knew, but I wasn't sure whether what I knew was right um,
Right.
until that day of the lesson when we
I
went
mean,
round, and I found that really really helpful. So,
you've said so many things that just to reiterate real quick, like so many things that you're saying right now are such jewels, I think, for so many practitioners to, if they can glean anything from your experience and really to get better in their own practice. But I think, first of all, having a kata, like to go back to that point,
mm,
having a kata or a method in which you approach the body, especially initially, I think in your beginning stages of your practice, and beginning stages is usually within the first 10 years of your practice, honestly. Like it
mm,
is so comforting and it lends to so much confidence in your practice because every time you're looking at the same thing, every time you're going in order. And yes, there are
mm,
times when you start to break away from that eventually, but I think that, even just your experience speaks so much truth that like having a predictable, standardized way that you approach the body every single time from diagnosis down to treatment really does lead to an entirely different level of confidence in your practice. And
mm,
and I think also, the other 2 points that you were mentioning, first of all, Ora Sensei is the person who inspired me to study Iyashinomichi. So I'm so glad that you feel the same way about him that I do. I love the man so much. He is an amazing person.
mm. Yeah.
But I think having that initial study that you had in ShinKyu where you were like, I get it theoretically, but I'm not really sure. And then coming to Japan with me and having that hands-on experience, having, Yasuda Sensei confirm exactly where the live point is and really confirm that. And then having you be able to go say, like, okay, I've done all this study. Now it's clicked. Now I can go straight back into clinic and having that immediate flow of like, look at all these results I'm getting, with things
Mm,
that I didn't have confidence in before, is something that I would love for every single practitioner that graduates from acupuncture school to have. Like, I wish they could have it from the day they start their practice. I know that's unrealistic, but
mm,
but I think those three points that you just brought up of like, again, having that standardized method to your practice, a standardized way that you treat, diagnose, building on the foundation of learning theoretically to hands-on practice and bringing it into palpation, and then saying like, okay, now we're going to really use those live points and really base our treatment on that, and then being able to run into practice is just,
mm.
I'm so glad that you had that experience. I'm so glad that you have that in your practice. It's, I just wish everyone could have that. It's so, I want everyone to have that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Um, I think I feel like this way is going to grow. I feel there's a need for it, and generally, um,
yes.
but it's all good things take time, and it's to
Yes.
build things up. And now you have people in different parts of the world coming into that one place, and
It's
that's
so
that's
cool.
kind of yeah. So
Very
I think
cool.
that is a key thing there. Having, I mean, there were people from Philippines, America, Israel, um,
Indonesia
Indonesia, so different areas of South America, lots of different areas, and I think that's that's what's going to help inspire
hmm
people is seeing other
Yeah.
people. Um, I mean, even the need within the Chinese traditional Chinese acupuncture through applied channel theory. You can tell that there is a need for palpation, and people
Yeah.
are interested in it. And that's how one of the ways that I came through to Japanese acupuncture. I feel like there is a need for it, and recently I did a 2 hour workshop at a conference, and part of it did involve palpation. And some people had never palpated or done much of that at all, but they were
Wow.
interested in it, and they've been practicing for a long, long time. I mean, what they were doing was amazing and like fantastic from what they were telling me. So they are still amazing practitioners, but I could tell that they were interested. They were asking questions that I'd never even thought about. So I had to really think clearly about exactly my process of
Hmm.
palpating. Um, it was just palpation on the surface. What are you doing? What are you thinking? I've been doing it for so long. I hadn't actually thought about it enough to explain it. Um,
Yeah.
so it's really made me think when I'm teaching this lesson. It's in April May time to the first year students. How should I describe it? What am I actually doing and feeling, rather than just let's just do it. Um, so it's really made me think about that generally, and I think that people's curiosity and asking those questions, um, I think that there's definitely a need for it. So
Yeah.
I can see this growing. So,
Yeah. I
but
hope so.
yeah,
Yeah, I hope so. But
it will.
like, I think again, like uniquely for you, James, one of the things that really excites me about you being in the program is because you do have more of that teacher's perspective on things, and you're able
Mm,
to really translate things in a very, very, very beautiful way for people who are learning TCM in their educational model and still give it to them in that paradigm. It's something that I'm really personally excited for you and your career because I think, again, we need more people like yourself really transmitting this knowledge into different areas, just as you said, in order to spread it. I am curious, like going forward in your career, what are your goals now for your practice? Because it sounds like up until this point, it was very, MSK, musculoskeletal stuff. And now your practice just coming back from Japan, which I mean was this November of 24, right?
yeah.
Has really started to transition like into other things that you're seeing. So what's your goals for your practice going forward?
So I want to eventually lead this on, uh, transition from acupuncture, and then include and then eventually do training in herbs, because I want it all to integrate, and I want to be able to broaden what I do. I was always told that musculoskeletal is your bread and butter. I agree with
Mm,
that. I'm always going to have people coming in, but what I really want is to have people coming in with chronic conditions. I
yeah.
want to help people. I've always treated digestive issues. I want to bring that a little bit further on. People that have fatigue, um, maybe that's chronic fatigue, or maybe it's just general fatigue. Um, I want to be able to treat. I want to be able to treat pretty much anything, and I want to be
Mm,
as versatile as I can. And that's how I've always felt. Um,
mm,
and I want to be as proficient as I can. I want to be as good as I can. So whenever I'm whenever I'm doing whatever I'm doing, whether it's reading and researching or whether it's trying to refine my techniques, I just want to be better. That's
mm,
all I want to be, is just to be better. And I feel like the only way I can do that is to integrate all of these things together. That's research, so I understand where I'm coming from and whether I can deepen my understanding. I've already found that in this last week. I've gone through hyper focus. For anyone watching this, I don't mind saying this. I've been quite public. I've recently been diagnosed as autistic, There's maybe some ADHD there as well, which I'll explore later in the future. But
Mm,
I even though it comes with its issues, I've got to use my strengths with that. So when if I come up with a time when I'm kind of my mind is really focused on one thing, I just need to go with it. And right now, just for this time period, it'll probably change next week. Needling and what it says about that in the classics have made me realize about what it means with what fullness and excess means just by looking at the words and
mm,
how the Chinese characters are translated. What do they actually mean? So it's made me think about that, and it's yeah. I just want to get really good, really. Um, the other thing is the moxa. Now I know
mm,
we've spoken about this, and I want to improve the sort of how it's taught. I also want to get better at it myself. I feel I'm
mhm,
confident enough with cones um, and needle mocks on the needle, but I want to get much better with rice grain. I feel like that will bring me to another level, which I'm not at the moment,
mm,
um, because it can go deeper into the body. When people say that the moxa goes to the blood level, into the organ level, that's
mm,
really only true at a really efficient level when it comes to rice grain,
mhm.
because cones generally don't go as deep. I don't know whether you agree with me on that, but I feel like cones really go to the channel and to the sinews, which is why I use it, and really that more exterior level. But the rice grain goes deeper, and if I really want to help
When
with
you're
chronic,
saying when you're saying cones, are you talking about the chinescu, like the larger
yeah,
cones?
ShinKyu,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah. No, I agree.
So
I agree.
I mean that's what I want to. So during lockdown, uh, I did some online teaching with someone else who I know you know, and her name is oh come on
Yuki
brain,
Atai? Yuki?
no, no, it's uh, Hannah Swift, and it's her Japanese
Uh,
teacher who's based
yep.
in Kyoto, and
Hmm.
um, and Hannah went through the different sizes of moxa and how deep that they go, and I found that really interesting and very
Hmm.
useful to understand, and it almost made me think like it's the rice grain is like a if you think of the thickness is like a pin,
Mm,
and always thought back to my science lessons at school that a sharp pin can penetrate a lot deeper than something which is a lot sort of bigger. You're
hmm.
trying to push that into the body, and it doesn't penetrate. But something which is thin and sharp goes in deeper,
Hmm.
a lot easier. And that's kind of how I pictured it in my head when she was showing these different levels. And I thought, well, I wish I could do rice grain. So I did a rice grain course a year or two after, which helped, but I was still rubbish because
It's
um,
hard.
uh, yeah, it is difficult, and
So
we were
hard.
using water, and for me, water gets everywhere.
Yeah.
Um, I'm very good at swimming. Well, not like I mean, I live by the sea. I've
Yeah.
been swimming since I was 5. I'm good at swimming. I'm very good at that. Water gets in me everywhere. I'm very good at collecting water. So if I get a little bit, it just goes everywhere. So when I was lighting the cone, it wasn't staying up, and it also wasn't
Yeah.
lighting because it was wet. So I was like,
Yeah.
ah. So so you using a method which doesn't involve water is really helpful.
Yeah.
Even though
And
it's harder to keep it in
yeah.
place, it's
Well,
very helpful. So
we'll
yeah,
get there. I mean, for those who don't know who are watching this in ShinKyu, we have a whole section just on moxibustion. So we'll get there. We'll get there, James. It's gonna
yeah.
come. A little bit of
But
practice.
that's the thing with practice. That's the thing, and that's what we
Hmm.
do each time we go into the clinic. We practice, and I want to get. That's all I want to do. My only goal is just to get better, to
That's a
learn
lovely
more, and to
goal.
grow. And whatever interests I have at the time, that's where I'm going to go, because I know
Mm,
that I'm going to learn more when I'm focused on that. So
yeah.
it's and yeah, when I go back next week, something will come up in the clinic, and then I'll be focused on that, or whatever that will be. I don't know, but
Yeah.
it'll be something different. And that's it. Learning from mistakes, or uh, from areas where I feel like I need to know more or get better at. That's where I learn, and I see my
I
gaps,
mean,
and I
so well said.
try and fill them in, and that's why I'll have a phase where I go through one thing and a phase where I go through something else,
Hmm.
um, and that's it really. My Yeah,
I think,
without
but
really.
I think that should be every practitioner's goal who is watching this really is to just try to become a better practitioner, not to become, and I say practitioner, like to be a better practitioner, not a better theorist, not a
Hmm.
better intellect, not a better study, but a better practitioner, and with that, that means getting better results in clinic. And I think what you said too, like learning from your mistakes, I think is so important. We were just having one of our so those who don't know, in ShinKyu, we have 5 Zoom calls a month where we get on and we chat about cases, or we do acupuncture technique for mocks or whatever. And today, right before this conversation, we happened to have our question and answer call for the month, and we were talking about treating little babies, little newborns who were having tongue ties, and I was mentioning during that um, that there's going to be a few little ones, unfortunately, that you overtreat. And the question was really like, how do you know when to stop, right? And it's unfortunate that you have to make a mistake on a newborn. And if possible, I would love for nobody to ever have to do that. But it is so important to give yourself space as a practitioner to say that you are human and that you will make mistakes. You will make them as infrequent as you possibly can, but you are going to make them. And when you make them, you are going to do everything in your power to learn from them because that's going to make you better. And I mean, what, I mean, right there, I mean, is a super powerful statement. I think a lot of practitioners out there, I don't know about you, James, but I know a lot of the students I teach who are still in school, they're just so afraid to make mistakes. They're so afraid to try a new
Mm.
thing, and it really holds them back, and it makes a lot of people, when they make that mistake, then they lose their confidence and all of that. And I think if people can have mentorship to guide them through that mistake and learn from that mistake, man, we'll all just become better. And that's my own selfish
Mm.
goal. I want everybody to be better at their job because
Yeah, yeah,
it
because
would
it's
be
a good representation on all of us. Is
yeah,
if we're all, if we're all good. I think that when it
yeah.
comes to making, uh, uh, I think it all. When it comes to people receiving, like, um, what's the word? Oh, criticism. Yeah, criticism.
Mm,
Um, I think sometimes, uh, sometimes it can be the person giving the criticism. Sometimes it could be that we're trying so hard to get it right
mhm,
that when we hear that we're doing it wrong, it could be almost crushing. And or and it all depends on where you are at that moment. And
mhm.
uh, sometimes it can be difficult. Um,
Yeah,
I
I
think
agree.
that one of the things I remember you saying before, this was the morning of the first day of In Touch, was telling everyone to be an empty vessel, an empty cup. Uh, and I think that sometimes that we can be filled with so much information,
Yeah,
and we can also have conflicting
yeah,
information from different teachers, that we're always afraid to do the wrong thing with the wrong
yeah.
teacher. I remember feeling like that myself, that if I did such and such with one person, they'll say, "Oh, that's brilliant." And then another person, if I do exactly the same thing, they'll say, "That's completely wrong," blah, 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 blah. And I'll be
Mhm.
thinking, "Oh, what do I do? What do I do?"
Yeah. Now what?
And
Now what? Now what I do?
makes it so difficult.
Yeah.
Um, so uh, my advice to anyone is, take some stuff that some people say with a pinch of salt, but
Mm,
also do see what any advice that anyone is giving you, they're telling the advice from not just their own point of view, but also their own experience. So they might be
Yeah.
coming from a different angle and take on board all these things. But then what you can do is when you build your own practice, you can you can take the bits that work for you. So something that might work for me won't necessarily work for someone else.
Hmm.
Maybe it might be the way that I explain something or the way I do something that whoever that might be might not be able to do what I am saying
Yeah.
because maybe some of the things I do is because of the shape of my body and my
Hmm.
arms. I've got long arms, and my the rest of my body is a normal a normal body. And I know that I can stretch my arms out in ways that other people can't, which is an advantage for me. But if I tell someone to stand in a particular place, they won't necessarily be able to do what
Yeah.
I am doing. So it's just trying to adapt
Yeah.
whatever is right for that person. And I think that sometimes we can be blindsided by trying to um, be exactly that same, doing exactly the same thing as what that
Hmm.
person is telling you to do, and it's just finding the right way. I've
Yeah.
realised that due to massage, my thumb is like this, and now I know that I need to, when I am rolling moxa, I need to bear that in mind with my shape because
Yeah.
because I because I know that I need to bend it more, and that was advice you gave me on a
Yeah.
on a video I put up. I need to bend it more. Now that might be more than a regular person, but it is right for me. So
Hmm.
I need to gain strength in my thumb because I've spent so long not needing to do that because it's bent that way naturally. Well,
Yeah.
not
You just
naturally
lock
due
the
to the,
joint.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's like that all the time. So I need to bend it more to get the right consistency
Yeah.
when I'm pushing it through. That's something individual for me, which might not be the same for someone else.
Yeah.
So I might go, oh no, I am bending it, and that might be my ego telling me that's it, and it might be crushing because I'm thinking I'm doing my best, but knowing that that's actually the thing I do need to do because look at it, and you can see it's even more with my right side
Which
because I
is
use my right.
hilarious. Look at my thumbs. They're like straight, nothing bent
Yeah,
about those suckers.
yeah. So you have an advantage of not doing massage before doing acupuncture. I'm assuming you haven't done massage, but
No, thumbs were not made for massage, that's for sure.
yeah. So no, they're not. I spent a long time trying to do this to make sure my thumbs last longer,
Yeah.
but it hasn't. You know, there'll be a time when I will have to stop doing it. But in the
Yeah.
meantime, I will carry on. But it's something to bear in mind. So it's thinking about what the
Yeah.
what the teacher is saying. Sometimes sometimes it's appropriate. Sometimes they're actually telling you something you're not even aware of, and you kind of have to do a little bit of soul searching, put the ego aside, and just thinking, what are they saying? And when I using my thumbs, it's a perfect example. I need to
Yeah.
be aware of that, and I've also been aware of my sensitivity of my fingers. I'm also these fingers, so I need to build that up. And you give me some good advice for that as well, which I'm going to follow through when I go back into my clinic. Tomorrow's my first day back in after
Oh,
Christmas and New Year,
congrats.
so I'm going to go back in and really try and build up that sensitivity through the dexterity to try and build that up because that's an area which I didn't become aware of until very very recently, and I've forgotten the reason why. But I
Yeah.
need to make sure that I do that. So yeah,
Well, I'm curious, like with that in mind, if if someone who's watching this is like, man, I'd love to transition my practice from TCM into traditional Japanese medicine, outside of what you've already suggested, which I think is really sage advice of just like, hey, put your ego aside and listen to what the teacher's saying, try to figure out how it applies to you and work with what you got, which I think is everything. I need to hear that like on a daily basis for everything in my life. But if there's anything else that that you might suggest, what would it be? Again, if they were trying to transition.
Um, I would say, I know you're probably already thinking this, you need to have a mentor. You
Yeah.
need to have someone to show you a way to actually get there in the first place.
Yeah.
Prior to going to Japan, I had been working through some of the material that gave me at least a small foundation, something to
Hmm.
go by, and then afterwards, I was able to go back over that again, and then look at the kneeling technique, because the kneeling techniques that were taught that in Japan are on the platform. So I was
Yeah,
able
in
to go
ShinKyu,
back.
they're there.
Yeah, I was able to go back to it. What I've done previously with other courses, that's mostly, it doesn't really matter the style. I've done it, and then afterwards I'm like, what do I do now?
Hmm.
I don't know what I'm meant to be doing.
Yep.
There may be a WhatsApp group, but you need someone there to show you and guide you.
Yep.
And I feel that's one of the main things. There was one student who was a student with me. When I as a colleague when I was studying Tween R, and he'd
Mm.
finished at the same time as me, but from another college. He had also done lots of little mini CPD courses, in lots of different areas. So he did Dong, Japanese acupuncture, which he's really into. I think that's he's still doing some. I'm not sure what style, and lots of different things. And he was getting quite confused because they're all kind of a
Hmm.
mishmash of lots of different things.
Yep.
And that made me think about, not if I'm going to do anything, make sure they kind of work together.
Hmm.
Um, and um, if you're doing things from lots of different areas of Chinese medicine, Japanese medicine, etc., everything just gets too mangled like spaghetti. You just don't know
Hmm.
how it'll all kind of link in. So you need something which kind of works as a whole. You don't want to go off and do one thing and do another thing, which is contradictory to what you've just learned, because it's
Hmm.
confusing, and you won't know how to put it all together.
Yeah.
Um,
But you don't
that's one
know
of
if
the
it's contradictory until you go to it, is the problem.
Yeah, and it's not to say that one thing is right and one thing is wrong. It's just they don't work together.
Yeah.
That's really what I'm trying to say. It's not that this style is better than that style. It's just what works. So if you start
Hmm.
doing something and then learning something else which is completely different, you how are you going to integrate it? And
Yeah.
I learned that lesson from that person, that I need to make sure that whatever I do, it's got to work.
Hmm.
So I'd say mentorship, something which is integrative, not necessarily what you were already doing, but something which can work as a whole. So when you're learning something, it's all coming from the same place. So
Yeah.
if you're trying, so
So important.
so if you're doing, I'm just going to say random styles. If you do Kiko, then you do Malika, Toyohari, all great in their own rights, but
Hmm.
they all work very differently. There
Hmm.
are some things which make it make the different styles very well. They all are Japanese styles, and they all are coming from a similar area, but they're all very different. I did a 1 day course on Toyohari when I first finished my training, and I
Mm.
found it all so confusing because it was only a month after or a couple of months after I finished my TCM training. I didn't understand what the
Mm.
hell they were talking about. I didn't understand any of it at
Yeah.
all, because I've just been coming from a completely different place. And then,
It's really missing the foundations, right? Like that's what you're
yeah,
learning in Shinkyu before you came to Japan was that introduction and general touch points and kind of starting to work through things before you go into that 1 day lecture and go, oh, that was all those things you were talking about. And now we can review it,
mm,
you know?
yeah,
So important. So important.
yeah.
Sorry.
No,
I
that's
didn't
all
mean to
right.
cut
No,
you
you just
off.
summarised what I just said, which is really great. Um,
Yeah.
I I mean that's what gave me the confidence when I finished the last day of the Ayashi no Mishi. It gave all of that together. It wasn't just one
Hmm.
thing; it was lots of things. All of that together gave me the confidence. I thought I can actually do this,
Hmm.
and I know that I can ask more questions, which I have asked a few questions. I've got more, which will come up later.
Facebook
But
community, all of those
yeah,
Zoom
yeah,
classes, you just let me know. I have no problem.
and and that's one of the
Yeah.
other advantages of ShinKyu University is you can ask more questions,
Yeah.
and it's a group of people, and I'll say this quite openly. When I was there, everyone was just so nice and so
Yeah.
level-headed and so supportive in every way. I got that from every person I spoke to. Actually, the
Hmm.
Japanese student, not students, they were practitioners now. Japanese practitioners as well as all the international practitioners. I found that with everyone. Everyone there was just so kind. Um,
Yeah.
I really appreciated how everyone was to each other. Um,
Hmm.
that made it easier talking to people, and everyone was really helping each other. I really appreciated that as a
Yeah.
community.
Yeah. And
Um,
that's something that, honestly, I have really worked towards getting in ShinKyu. Like I am very, very picky about who comes into our community. And that's because, I grew up, so to speak, at Toyo ShinKyu, where we studied it in touch, right? I grew
mm,
up as a practitioner around people, as you have now found out, who are
mm,
amazing people. Toyo ShinKyu as a school attracts really amazing people. I don't
mm,
know what it is about that school, but it just attracts really not only intellectual, but present and kind and understanding and inquisitive. They're just great people. They're really
mm,
great people. And so when I created Shinkyu, I was like, well, I want that because it's
mm,
great. So I've really handpicked the people who I'm allowing into the program for those,
mm,
to make sure that we have a community that is supportive while we learn.
mm.
Otherwise, it's not fun otherwise. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I'd say that's also another important thing as far as if you're trying to transition,
Mm.
don't try and do it by yourself. Um,
Yeah.
it's good to have other people around you. Um, I've certainly benefited from it.
Mhm.
I think it's a really nice community.
Thank you.
So yeah,
Thank you. Well, thank you so much, James, for your time. I really appreciate you introducing not only your practice, but your kind of methodologies and perspectives towards teaching and all of that. And I'm very excited just to put in a little plug for your Sinews book that you're going to hopefully be publishing soon.
oh,
Hopefully.
it's going to take a few years. I'm, I was saying that a few years ago. I've written probably more than a third of it.
Okay.
Um, once I've finished section two, the rest of it's going to fall into place very easily. Um, but I just need to knuckle down, and I've got things I have to do first, which I have to prioritize before I
Yeah.
go back to it again. Um, but it's one of those things that I love, and I want to be able to show people that the classics have all the information there. One of the things I've heard so much is, oh, the classics don't have much information about the channel sinews.
Oh,
Yes,
no,
they
they do.
do.
Yes,
They're
they
just not all in the
so
same
much.
place. They're
Yeah.
they're everywhere. If you know where to look, you'll
Yeah.
find it in lots of different places. Because when it's talking about the channel sinews, it's talking about it in relationship to the skin, to the bones, to the channels,
Hmm.
to everything. And you have to look at it, the body as a whole, not just one thing on its own. You have to look at everything. And the only way to understand it is looking at the system as a whole, because that's really what the Ling Shu is talking about. It's like the pathogen enters. Okay, it has a choice of where it's going to go. If it
Hmm.
goes if it goes to the skin area, it will present like this. If it goes to the sinews, it will go like this. If it goes into the bones, it'll be like this. If it goes deeper, it might enter the organ. That's
Hmm.
really what it's saying. But it's like finding out why it does that, how it does that, and what you need to do. And it gives you pointers throughout all the classics. You don't just use the Ling Shu on its own. You've got to also look at the other classics as well, because it's giving you areas, and like it'll say a bit of information here, and then it'll say a little bit of information, say from the Ling Shu to the to the Su Wen, and
Hmm.
it's combining it together. You can't isolate just one area. You've got to look at the whole thing as a whole to really get an idea. So it's all there. It's just trying to put it in, and I'm trying to get that information out. It's just taking longer than I want it to, because I want to give it all the information to everyone right now, as you probably already know. But I can't. I've got to hold back on a lot of it until I've got it all done. Um,
Well, and I
it's
think too, once that book comes out, I think we'll all benefit from it. So
I hope
anxiously
so.
waiting, anxious but patiently waiting.
Yes.
All right. Well,
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so
yeah.
much. And yeah.
And
I look.
it was such a pleasure talking to you, James. Thank you so much.
It was a pleasure talking to you as well. Always a pleasure. Take care.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much for watching. It was truly my pleasure to talk to James and to transmit the knowledge that he has accrued over his practice to your practice. Now, if you're inspired to learn more about traditional Japanese medicine and how it can benefit your practice and bridge the gap between theory and actual palpation and practice, then you're going to want to set up an interview with me. Let's chat about what it can do for you. There's an interview link for that in the description box below. Now, I'm so excited again to be bringing you things all about traditional Japanese medicine. If you're interested in learning more about creating your moxa practice, you're going to want to watch this video right over here. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that little bell to be notified for future videos. See you.